Hello, everybody. This is Sandra Wishing speaking from Biocom in Berlin, and we are welcoming you for this fifth AMR conference, again taking place digitally. So last year, this was our first virtual AMR conference, and we hoped that we will be maybe in face-to-face this year, but as we all see, it's not. So we are welcoming you again for this virtual edition this year, a bit shorter. We will have 3 days of afternoon sessions focusing on certain topics. And today it's all about COVID-19 and the impact it has or had or will have on the AMR community. And I'm handing over now directly to our moderator of today's first session, Deborah O'Neill. She's representing Novabiotics as an SME, but also as a board member from Beam Alliance, our major cooperation partner for this conference. So hello, Deborah. Nice to have you.
Hi, Sandra, and thanks so much, everybody, for joining. I can see the participant numbers creeping up quickly and steadily. I'd like to add my welcome to everyone, and also, as Sandra mentioned, on behalf, excuse me, of the Beam Alliance, which I'm going to give you a brief introduction to before we set out the formalities of session 1, day 1. And I'm very much looking forward to the 3 fantastic keynote talks that we have, and then followed by what I'm sure will be a very lively panel discussion around the status quo and what's changed since COVID, lessons learned, and how things could look for the future and the impact on the AMR field. Okay, so this is the topic for the day, and as I said, I'm really looking forward to the first session. We've got some fantastic speakers lined up, and if we could move on to the next slide, please. Brilliant. So as promised, I'm just going to spend a minute or two refreshing you and updating you on what the Beam Alliance has been doing, and just a reminder of who we are. So next slide, please. So the Beam Alliance is biotech companies from Europe innovating in AMR research, and we give members a unique voice. We represent SMEs in this space, and we propose and support policies and incentives in antimicrobial research and development in Europe and in a One Health perspective. So we represent around 70 members with a product pipeline of more than 130 assets. So that's impressive, and a key point here is the SMEs driving innovation in the AMR space and us providing a voice for that community. We were founded in 2016, and our members span across 16 different countries. So we as an alliance really are the key industry stakeholder regarding innovation in the AMR space, conducted in Europe, but as I'll come on to, our reach, we hope, goes much beyond Europe as well. So next slide, please. Just to point out that we have a diverse SME membership with a broad range of assets that, as I mentioned before, total more than 130 different products at various stages of development. Next slide, please. And that was before the summer holidays. I doubt we've had any significant membership differences. This is just a reminder of who we are. So the board is really made up of people who have very busy day jobs running our own SMEs in the antimicrobial R&D space across different countries over Europe. Next slide, please. And I'm preaching to the choir for the most part here, I know, but it's very, very important that Beam exists, and to try and do what we can really to help where we can in the innovation landscape, that being stalled at the moment, as we know, with the business model being broken to some degree. The problems highlighted on the left hand of this slide we're all very aware of: volumes of sales being low, new products being kept in reserve to limit, which is absolutely the right case, the rise of resistance, low pricing, etc. R&D costs inevitably higher than the return on investment for new traditional antibiotics. So this is a problem, and trying to fix this commercial issue. But SMEs are the real key players here. So the reason we have to fix this broken innovation landscape for SMEs is because we hold more than 80% of the AMR portfolio. So 74% of the clinical assets in antimicrobial development, and more than 83% of preclinical assets in terms of antimicrobial drugs in development. So we really have to be the voice for the SME community, and it's essential that we protect that community. So the whole ecosystem of European SMEs focusing on AMR is at risk. So we need to protect those companies and do as much as we can. So on the next slide, this is just a snapshot of everything that we do in terms of activities and outreach in a critical period for the AMR field. It's a critical period at the moment. There's so much happening in terms of potential legislative changes across the globe, either in action or being considered. We need to influence those on behalf of our SME members where we can. So interaction with stakeholders by BEAM on behalf of our companies in Europe at a cabinet and service level, interactions in member states. You'll spot the British flag there. I love the fact that that's still included in that little group because of the membership of the BEAM board and the interactions that we're able to have at a country level. We have subgroups focused on the push and pull landscape at the moment, and obviously tracking things that are going on in terms of pilot reimbursement schemes, the Pasteur Act, everything that's going on globally. We contribute to the work of different organizations. For example, a couple of the directors sit on the AMR Industry Alliance. We work with the WHO when it comes to their surveys, looking at the current antibiotic pipelines, and engagement with patient associations. So just on the next slide, that's really all I want to say before we get to the important topic of today. What we deliver in terms of this is a number of position papers, fostering fruitful exchanges like our participation in this event. We've had various roundtables. We're looking forward to the in-person event next April. And then the very final slide. As I said, this is a critical period in the AMR field for all of us. And if you could just forward to that final slide, please. We're going to be very busy as an alliance, but I'm not going to steal the thunder. You need to stay tuned for day 3 and the wrap-up session in this really critical period. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we propose to do, what we think is important in terms of our actions for the remainder of this year and for the future. So make sure you stay tuned in for the wrap-up sessions at the end of the conference. So without further ado, I am very much looking forward to handing over to our keynote speakers. I'm going to keep the introductions in the interest of time fairly brief. The speaker profiles are obviously online, but I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our first speaker, David Barros-Aguirre, who is the VP and head of GSK Global Health Pharma R&D unit based from Spain. And hopefully David's slides I can see coming up now is ready to go. So David, pleasure, hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. So first of all, thank you for the kind invitation, and particularly for inviting me to talk about the TD initiatives that often are on the edge of the stalling because of this mathematics of investing and what can you get out of it are on the one edge of the AMR. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction. So because I think that what is interesting is this Q&A part of it. So I'll go very briefly about the topics I want to cover, and I'll mainly cover 3 topics in these 10 minutes. So I'll make sure I do it on time. It is first how TB and COVID, how COVID has affected TB as a disease and TB research, and then I'll talk about the landscape and focus on one particular type of collaboration, that is the TB Drug Accelerator, as one exemplar of how things could be done to facilitate and foster innovation in the AMR field. So can I advance the slides myself? All right, yeah, I see it. So first of all, just see the red numbers and what it was planned before COVID-19, and these numbers on the NTB sponsored by the World Health Organization. And if we see what we were intending to do, the number of people that should be reached and the number of people that should get into TB treatment, it was simply amazing and very, very challenging. And this was using existing treatments. When all this was planned, then COVID-19 came into action. And what has happened since then? So as you can imagine, the use of the face mask, probably the first time you will say, oh, less TB because you're using face masks. Well, it's not just that. It's just the people doesn't go to the clinics. The people doesn't get diagnosed. Healthcare workers are not any longer there. The people doesn't get tested. And so what has happened first is that the number of notification of TB cases worldwide has decreased very significantly. But what does this mean? That then the TB is going to go less and less and less because of our protection measures against COVID? Well, unfortunately, mathematical modelers doesn't think this would be like that. And the impact on COVID is that just in the 3 months, between 25 and 50% less cases reported could mean an excess of about 400,000 deaths. So we believe that the number of cases might decrease, but the number of deaths might be significantly larger. And we believe that we are going to go 8 years back for this reason. And these numbers are only on drug-sensitive TB. The numbers of MDR TB, because of different parts, can be extremely complicated. But only numbers and data will tell us how the impact on COVID will take place, and surely will be very different from place to place. On TB research, I think this is common to other areas. So first of all, scientists have moved from TB to do work in COVID. So we have lost a significant talent retention, has been very complicated, and even facilities have been shifted to the alarming situation on COVID-19, but particularly on the access to clinical sites and phase 1 units. This has been a very negative impact on our ability to conduct research with a new molecule. So we hope that slowly and gradually things can improve, although very worrying, the numbers are becoming now public, as for example in Vietnam. So all this situation might be almost a disaster if it wasn't, because there was, for a number of years, the collaboration landscape in TB was very has advanced a lot, and I have tried to put in this slide for you to look at it later. What are the initiatives that at present exist? And I think you have heard before about the IMI project, the AMR Accelerator, which different pillars that are of which TB is probably the most significant one in terms of volume, with 2 big projects, ERA for TB and Unite for TB. But there are also, all those are within Europe. And on the bottom of the slide, the other key player is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with 2 initiatives, the TB Drug Accelerator and the PAN-TB. collaboration, which one follows the other as much as UNITE and ERA for TB are within the IMI framework. So today I'm going to give you a snapshot of what is the TB Drug Accelerator. So the TB Drug Accelerator is a groundbreaking collaboration between pharmaceutical companies and major research institutions. This has not started today, and this is good because I can talk about something that started in 2012. It was supported by the CEO Roundtable, where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a key promoter of it, and cover discovery activities that goes from target selection to preclinical candidate selection. And the goal is to generate different TB candidates and understand how to combine the different candidates in an innovative way. So new treatments that are shorter, simpler, and safer can reach TB patients at the shortest period of time. So why this is so novel? So here we have 6 different pharmaceutical companies. You can see logos in there, including GSK, Merck, AbbVie, and others, and different research institutes. But we are all working together and in open collaboration principles and based on the sharing. So all the pharmaceutical companies put their assets and their hits available, and then we decide which company is best suited to develop a certain type of a certain hit of a certain type of modality to move it forward. And then all the other collaborations, all the academic collaborators are there to function as partners to facilitate the discovery of new compounds. So as an exemplar, you can Google this and this. So on the details. So we are trying to cover all the different mechanisms of action, and this goes from the very early stage, late stage, and with deliverables that are already tangible. And in the next slide, I have summarized what we have got today. So 5 preclinical candidates have been identified. 4 of them are already in clinical trials. And the TBDA partnership amongst the different initiatives covered by the CEO Roundtable is on the top of a list because of how easy it has been to set principles by which the different companies, different pharmaceutical companies can decide, oh, you better work in this, better work on that, but our compounds can get, and the design of novel combinations have been done from scratch, not at the final stage of the delivery, of the discovery and development, but at the very beginning. So the novel design and the intelligent design of novel combinations, I think this is a fantastic exemplar of how to do this from scratch. But obviously this is not a panacea, and I think loads of things are needed. So what is needed next, and I put these 4 points where I think it is important, that is explore this type of collaboration to use other modalities, and particularly host-derived therapies. The second part is address the phase 3 funding gap, as this requires extra sustainable funding gap sources. The third will be exploiting synergies between diagnostic and treatments, as I believe this is a key for governments to support us. And the fourth, and I think is in everybody's mind, is the creation of more efficient push and pull incentives to maximize the discovery of new treatments. And with that, I'm sorry for being so quick. I would like to drop it to the next panel discussion member, Deborah. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much, David. That was perfect, and keeping us with plenty of time to have a great discussion a little bit later. I think plenty of food for thought there. I think in terms of lessons we can learn from Consortia and the TB story anyway. So from TB, those Consortia, over to, with great pleasure, Justin Yang from BARDA, and hopefully the BARDA perspective on the current state of play in antimicrobials development and what's happened a year and a bit on since COVID. So if you're teed up and ready to go, Justin, pleasure to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Deborah, and thank you to the AMR Conference and the conference organizers for hosting me. There we go. So my name is Justin Yang. I'm the Catalyst Office Director here in the Division of Research Innovation Ventures within the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, BARDA. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about preparing for the next pandemic and looking at alternative financing solutions associated with what we've been thinking about here in the U.S. government. So the BARDA model, as most of the people in the audience knows, we won't have to spend too much time on this, is that we partner with companies, academics, and technologists to make or bring forward medical countermeasures to the market by forming these public-private partnerships. One of the most, I guess, well-known public-private partnership is the CARB-X initiative, which is one of the sponsors on this conference. And CARB-X, I think, is one of the most successful models that we've seen where we've addressed this lack of pipeline in the early stage AMR space. And I believe we're year 4 now, and too much of a success of CARB-X and its members. Our industry partners are listed here over the last year, almost 15 years. We've been around since 2006 as an organization. And when Deborah put up the Beam Alliance slides, I saw a few of them that were quite familiar with BARDA as well, receiving funding. Our government partners are listed here. We work a lot through the interagency, specifically NIH and our Department of Defense colleagues here in the United States. And we look to them to really support some of the early stage biomedical innovations that can then be pushed forward for advanced development post phase 1. So they're listed here. We have, this is, if you've heard BARDA, any member of BARDA team speak, we always show this slide. It's probably one of the most proud kind of slides that we have, which is over the last, since 2007, we've brought forth 61 FDA approvals, licensures, and clearances, of which majority are vaccines and diagnostics. And, you know, in the latter of the last few years, we have brought forth some new antibiotic drug therapies to the marketplace. And it's a kind of like a, you know, wall of fame, if you will. Project BioShield is a market commitment that was put in place as from Congress in the Bush administration, and it basically allows companies who are working in a space that addresses an unmet need, such as Ebola or anthrax, without a clear commercial market. Project BioShield is there to provide payments through milestones and royalties to. Can you all hear me? I just want to make sure. I see someone in the chat that says they can't hear me. Okay, great. So Project BioShield is provided so that we can provide a steady stream of revenue to companies to ensure that they continue to sustain and be viable. We've supported 30 products over the years, and 18 of which have been added to the Strategic National Stockpile. 22 have been licensed or approved and cleared. And this is by no means a solution to the problem, because we have a lot more economic kind of cliffs, if you will, when we talk about startups and companies. And I'm looking forward to a discussion panel on this. So where I sit here within the ASPR, Assistant Secretary of Preparedness and Response, BARDA is here, and DRIVE is the newest division, and we're looking at innovation and ventures. It's in our name. And so DRIVE, we're looking at tackling some of the big problems in health security challenges and threats. We look at breakthrough devices and technologies. We try to model ourselves after the best practices in the entrepreneurial world. And we're a team of scientists and venture entrepreneurs. So most of the members on my team are either ex-pharma, ex-biotech, or ex-venture. So we look at this as a way to break free of the traditional government mold, if you will. Our current programs are listed here. We have ENACT, Sepsis, the Catalyst office, which is my office, Beyond the Needle, Redirect, and Immune Chip. If you go on our website, you can see a little more about each of the topics and the funding areas of opportunity for you to take a look at. So I'm going to skip this slide. So this is something that since I've taken the leadership role in the Catalyst office, we built towards a steady idea of a one-stop shop. On the left, I mean, we have the traditional funding opportunities that is available, going from the EASY broad agency announcement all the way to Project BioShield. We have our government colleagues here, NIH, DARPA, DITRA, JPAO. And on the right is actually things that are new that we have brought forth. The first one is the Health Security Impact Fund, which is a collaboration with Global Health Investment Corporation. It's a venture fund that was provided to us under the authorities of the 21st Century Cures. So BARDA has partnered with GHIC to start a venture fund looking at the health security with a health security focus. We're also developing an innovation studio model, which is a venture studio model of company creation, fostering formation, which is here. And if you look at the stars that is not starred, we have the Health Security Debt Fund and a Health Security Seed Fund. So these two things, I'm actually going out and talking to people and telling them that I want to make this reality, and trying to make it so through our through Congress and also senior government leadership. So the ability for the Catalyst office to have a one-stop shop where any stage of the company that's looking to raise non-traditional venture / commercial banking funds could go through the U.S. government, to go through BARDA as a way to raise these funds that's necessary, that isn't non-dilutive grants or contracts. So just real quickly here, BARDA Ventures, why are we doing this? Simply because one of the biggest challenges that we've seen talking to entrepreneurs is the uncertainty around government funding, right? Applying to grants and funding announcements often is slow and is not certain by any means. And you could go under while waiting for that. BARDA Ventures really is meant to be faster. It's meant to be less restrictive because you can, theoretically do anything with those funds that traditional venture funding would be allowed. And we have a focus on health security, which, is applicable to the unmet needs space that AMR is in. I always like to say this is that, pathogens evolve, threats continue to change, and we need better tools to prepare and respond, just like we need better treatments and therapies to respond to new emerging antimicrobial resistance. Some of the potential BARDA Ventures investment categories are here. If you want to talk more about your specific technology, I'm happy to chat with y'all. But these 8 by no means is meant to be representative of the entire landscape. It's just meant to spur some curious thoughts around, how does my technology fit in to this space? You can feel free to connect with us on social media. Here's the list at BARDA on Twitter and LinkedIn. And here's our websites that are listed here. So one other thing plugged I'm going to say before I turn it over is that we have a BARDA Industry Day conference that's coming up in October, and feel free to join. It's a free virtual meeting, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was great. I think you're going to get a lot more registrations today for that. That was a really great talk, and thanks so much for the update on that, and plenty to, I think, go back to in the discussion panel session. So that's fantastic. Okay, so rounding off the keynotes in this session, it's a pleasure to hand over to Janet Hemingway, and she's the founding director of the relatively newly formed, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this, UK-based Infection Innovation Consortium, as well as many, many other things Janet should be incredibly proud of establishing during her career. So if you're all teed up and ready to go, Janet, it's a pleasure to hand over to your good self. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about one of the newer consortiums that are around, but many of the members that you've just seen from the last two presentations are part and parcel of the current consortium that we've got here. So to give you a little bit of background, this came through the UK government Strength in Places programme, which was first advertised back in late 2018. When ourselves from the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine linked up with what was then the AMR Centre, now Infex Therapeutics, the University of Liverpool, our local NHS Trust, Evotech and Unilever, to pull together a consortium that was going to work on integrated solutions for human infections. The idea there was to look at where some of the pinch points were for developing things like new antibiotics, drugs, diagnostics, and vaccines, and work out where we could make a difference in terms of trying to get these products through to market in a much quicker, much faster format, going everywhere from the early product stage development and discovery through to actual product placement. The idea was that we would enable, through partnership, SMEs to work with research institutes and large-scale industry and the NHS, co-develop and de-risk new infectious disease formulations, validate and position these in the market, and facilitate through open access to these new platforms cheaper, quicker, and smarter anti-infectives. And a lot of this was intended to be around AMR, going from early stage development with a massive natural products library that we're putting on the AZ high throughput screening platform at Alderley Park, establishing a hits to leads program to work specifically with SMEs that Infex is heading up, provide new humanized organoid models for these, for lung, for skin, for liver, provide new rabbit and mouse models for screening, where we needed to do better PK/PD, and then look at novel human challenge models to be able to take these through first into man. As we set this up, though, it was a two-stage process. We'd applied for 18.6 million. We knew in early 2019 that we had been successful in getting through to the second stage. We submitted the second stage in 2019, and clearly at that point nobody knew anything about COVID and didn't expect the pandemic to come through. We heard around February 2020 that we had been successful, and at that point the idea was to leverage the 18.6 million of government money up to about 120 million of funding over a 5-year period. And then obviously COVID hit. And we realized very quickly that many of the platforms that we had developed were fairly agnostic for the particular infection that we were dealing with. And many of them very rapidly managed to pivot to COVID for the first projects coming onto these platforms. The net result of that has been that rather than develop a program that was supposed to be 120 million over 5 years, we are now formally 6 months into that program. No, 7 months into that program. And the program is already running at around 178 million, with a huge amount going on for COVID, but also activity ongoing for AMR within that portfolio as well. So to give you just a very quick run through of what we've got going on the AMR, I've already mentioned the natural product library. and getting that through to screening. And that at the moment is being fractionated, and we've got the first companies queuing up to screen. In our Hits to Lead program, we have 2 of our products going into phase 1 clinical trials. So this is just the Hits to Leads. On the organoids, we had a paper out with New Cells a couple of months ago in STEM, showing that we had a great respiratory model now, where we've got effectively a lung model that has basal cells, intermediary cells, mucus-producing cells, ciliated cells that beat. A much better screen that we can put onto a high throughput screen for molecules intended to work in the lung or around the lung. We can also do standard screening models, and clearly we've been doing that with SARS-CoV-2, but we put those onto our respiratory models as well. With the human challenge, we initially had a 12-bed unit at the NHS Trust, and another 6-bed unit within the accelerator unit that LSTM operate. We very rapidly expanded that. Oops, jumped on 2 now. To produce a brand new sort of accelerator pharmacy and clinic. So that's now an 18-bed outpatient facility. And alongside doing the human challenge activities, we could then take on the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID trial for the north of England, and we're one of the highest recruiting centres for that. We are expanding that facility even further, and there's another 19-bed inpatient negative pressure facility that should come online later this year. So although COVID has taken up a fair amount of the early phase 1 clinical trial space that we have, it has caused an expansion in that space, and we've kept some of the AMR activity ongoing as we've gone through. We obviously expect to be able to pivot some of this back to standard AMR and TB trials in particular in the near future. And then we've also been working on diagnostics. Again, when we set this up, we weren't intending this to be dominated by COVID diagnostics, but it has been. And so we've been set up as a FIND and WHO validation centre and doing an awful lot of COVID validation for the diagnostics that are coming through there. But there are a raft of other non-invasive diagnostics that are coming through that portfolio as well. And again, that has scaled up much more quickly because of COVID, but it hasn't stopped non-COVID activity completely going on from there. And exactly as you heard from Deborah, when she started this off with Beam, we know that an awful lot of the work that is going on in this space is linked to the SMEs. And we know that it's also difficult for many of those SMEs to actually access some of these platforms as well. So alongside the basic funding that we've got for the iiCON Consortium, for some of those SMEs, particularly in the UK, we have European structural investment funds to the tune of around 6.6 million, which gives the SMEs access to some of the platform technology that we've got. So a very rapid expansion of our program and a very successful expansion of it so far. So again, we expected after 5 years probably to be working with around 64 different companies. The expansion has happened so quickly that we're already working collaboratively with 90 different companies, many of them on the list that you've just seen from the earlier speakers. And so I hope we're now a new player in this space that can offer access to newer technologies for companies large and small. And in many ways, while COVID has distracted us from doing some of the AMR activity we might have started with, I suspect in the longer term, what it's done is expand the facilities far more quickly than we might otherwise have done. And I hope that that is going to be good in the long term for the whole community. And I'll stop there, and we can start the general panel discussion and questions.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Janet. Yeah, I mean, talk about, you must have known something was coming, a brilliant time to set the network up. Clearly the crystal ball was doing its job brilliantly. So if I could please ask David and Justin to join us again. I'm not sure, I've just messaged Sandra whether Marco Cavalieri from the EMA is able to join us for this. I think there's going to be a chat about so that we can get going with the panel discussion anyway. So I think, I can see Marco's joined us. Welcome, Marco. Okay, so he's still refreshing himself, I think, with the tech cameras and mics, as we've all done. So moderators initiative, I think I'm going to start off by going back to something I asked some of the speakers, believe it or not, at last year's conference, which is, you know, a general thing for all three of you, and hopefully Marco as well, which is, you know, clearly COVID, the pandemic, has taught everybody in the worst way possible the consequences of neglecting infectious disease, the importance of infectious disease, being ready for pandemics as well. And hopefully, you know, those are the silver linings that we can take from it. And my thing was a concern that wasn't going to stick, that, you know, what was this awareness really going to stick? So could things change and have an impact on the AMR field as a consequence? A, you know, really for the better, and B, is this a change that's sustainable? So I'd just love to throw that open just to get started to any of you. But I guess going, because David's had more of a break than anyone else, maybe if David would like to pitch in. And again, it'd be interesting, you know, in terms of your work on TB, just specifically, you know, lessons learned from COVID, any positive things that may then benefit that field going forward, and that it's sustainable.
Yeah. So I think, and I think I kind of speak on behalf of what is just a impression on this, and I think the level of awareness towards infectious diseases, that's going to remain. So I think if you see most of the pharma partners, they have raised their awareness on infectious diseases, and I think this is going to change where we were before. I have the hope that we can convince funders and governments on the importance of dedicating resources. So I think on this we are in a good spot. My feeling is that joining the treatment and prevention therapies might be a very significant and attractive place to be. So to what extent we can use other modalities that allow us to face a new pandemic and allow us to be ahead of the disease. So I think on these prevention therapies, that's going to be probably the space where a significant progression will be seen in the years to come. I hope the same happen to TB. Obviously, the key KPIs are a bit different from other diseases, but my feeling is that for us working on this field, we are going to receive much more attention and dedication that we had in the past, and we should demonstrate that it's a worth investment to be made by society. Yeah, that's my initial view. I can't comment on the specifics if there are questions on it.
Thanks, David. And Justin, Janet, do you agree? And I guess for me, is it, will this be sustainable, and is it going to benefit the AMR field and the silent pandemic, the silent tsunami of AMR, or is it going to be more about, is the attention potentially at risk of going towards readiness for another viral pandemic, for example? So are the potential positive changes that could benefit the AMR field going to be sustained? Could that balance be achieved between being ready for the next pandemic and addressing with one that's kind of here already in terms of AMR?
Maybe if I can just make a few comments then. So yes, I think there will be some sustained legacy from this, but I think it's up to us as a community to make sure that we get the right sustained legacy, and that it isn't just about pandemic resilience, which is clearly important, but that word pandemic will fade fairly quickly from the political sort of mindset as they start and concentrate on other things. So I think what we've demonstrated is we can get products through far more quickly and more effectively through to market. We need to do that. I think we've speeded up the vaccine pathway. I suspect the drug and small molecule activity has lagged behind somewhat, and there's more work to be done in that space. But there needs to be now lobbying activity to make sure that various governments and organizations really do understand that this needs to be a long-term shift, so that we don't face these sort of issues again, and that we're tackling some of the issues like AMR head on. So AMR hasn't gone away, and it's no less important than it was before this pandemic started. But let's work out how we can make sure it benefits from it.
Yeah, just to add on to Janet, I think, so there's like the pessimistic view, optimistic view, whatever you want to take from it. But having, I am a government employee, so obviously, this is my opinion, not the opinion of the U.S. government. But I think, I remember giving a talk in 2016, and we talked about how, if we had a pandemic that arose, we would not be ready, right? And we've known a lot of these kinds of similar constraints that are here. Just like, if you hear us talk about AMR today, we could say that we would not be prepared for a newly highly pathogenic AMR kind of threat that were to occur. I think we do need more attention on the whole general idea of health security and preparedness as a whole. A lot of the more designer, or I want to say like sexy kind of diseases, get a lot of funding, in which infectious disease is cast to the side. I think we have probably a good 5-year window, having been through H1N1, having been through Ebola, having been through Zika, of attention span from politicians and leaders that we can put onto kind of pandemic preparedness and health security. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think as a whole, there's discussions. I mean, secondary bacterial infections are very real, whether it's COVID or not. I think that's where kind of the talking points should be focused on in the AMR space, if we want to catalyze COVID-19 as a way to drive support in this space. Over.
That's fantastic, and yeah, kind of leads on to two questions there, Justin, that have come in. So I guess one we might have actually addressed. So Ed Siegwart, and apologies if I've mispronounced that, Ed, raises a point. Are we confusing the issue by possibly calling AMR a pandemic? And pandemic is a pandemic, and I guess we've got to focus on both, right? We need to be ready for the next pandemic in the context that we've seen COVID, or to Justin's point, it could be a single specific pathogen, and we need to be ready in that context while keeping absolutely the foot on the gas And you know, to Janet's point as well, with AMR and you know, keep that there as well. So maybe, you know, we start to pull back and maybe just the nomenclature or how we're explaining the situation. So there's no confusion. AMR is AMR, but we're still focusing on pandemic readiness, and that leads into another point. So I guess that's one thing, just how we're explaining both and preventing some confusion. We have another question. To what extent is COVID, or has COVID uncovered the realities of antimicrobial resistance, and has it helped us refocus on AMR and I guess you know, issues and the use of drug stewardship, etc. So it's probably back to that, you know, the positives of COVID having highlighted the problem, or in reality, has it exacerbated a problem in terms of, I guess, you know, the use of antimicrobials. So it's that balance, isn't it, of a pandemic that's probably, as we said, you know, put this in the spotlight, but you know, the reality of AMR, because we've seen this, you know, very focused period, I guess, of very intensive antimicrobial use as well. So any thoughts from the panel on that?
Yeah, I'll just you know, AMR continues to be an issue. I just go back to the idea that, you know, the spending of the funding provided to these spaces are just, you know, less than 1%, you know, to fund these types of new research that's necessary, as well as new mechanisms of action for therapies. I think that you know, whether whoever supports Disarm or Pasteur in the United States, I think, you know, there needs to be some concerted effort around making a push to getting some sort of kind of end result done, such that you know, new technologies that come through isn't faced with the kind of economic landmines that are met with companies in this you know, critical space. And you know, COVID or not, I think the issue lies there, and that's probably my opinion on that question.
Great. Anything from?
Deborah, if you let me go, I'm going to try to link both. But on the previous matter, I think it would be very interesting to see how COVID has affected people that have other diseases. Obviously, we're going to have a good read on what happened with TB and COVID. So, because this goes both directions. What about people that has got another disease like TB, for example, and how susceptible they are to acquire or to suffer from COVID? But the other way also happened. So what happened with the people that have got COVID? How susceptible they would be to other lung infections, for example. So I think this interaction between a pandemic, a new pandemic, and those that have an underlying risk of suffering from this pandemic, I think this is a very good reason why I believe that AMR should receive or will receive much more attention than it was in the past, because people that have undesired outcomes or worse outcomes were those that have other comorbidities. So I think that's a point that we should take into account. And about the funding, I think I'm positive and I'm optimistic about the opportunity. I see this simply as an opportunity to outline what is needed and what we can deliver, and I would encourage the exploitation of a field that I don't think we have done as much as we could, that is on the host therapies and understanding how can we, I'm not going to say that we can do personalized medicine in the AMR space, but probably we can get closer to it with the time. I think that will be the new wave of antibiotics coming. Over.
Great stuff. Thanks, David. So I believe Marco can now hear us. So welcome, Marco. And I think we've lost him again. So a question that I was going to put to Marco is something actually that Janet touched on. And again, it's Marco's back. So hopefully he can hear me and can jump in for this one. We've obviously seen an unprecedented change, I guess, just in the regulatory process and how the vaccines were approved. You know, how can we learn from that potential impact on antimicrobials for, you know, diseases with urgent unmet need as well? So I guess it's again the things that will stick. And I like Janet's terminology of, you know, legacy and the positive things. And I guess it's beyond these therapeutic areas as well, but certainly at least for AMR and other infectious diseases. So hopefully Marco can jump back in as well. But, you know, I'd love to hear the panel's thought on that as well. So just, you know, different regulatory processes for antimicrobials, full stop, now that we've seen the changes and seen it in practice for the COVID vaccines.
It looks like we've lost Marco again, so maybe I can jump in a little bit there. So it's been clear that I think we needed to do something about trying to make the regulatory system a little bit more fit for purpose is probably the wrong term, but a bit more streamlined to try and get things through in a much quicker format. And that's been true not just for AMR, but for a whole range of different areas. And I think demonstrating that it can be done with what's happened with the vaccines right now, that it can be done safely and effectively, is something then that is going to allow that conversation to be opened up with the regulatory agencies. They are inherently cautious, and quite rightly. And so I don't think it's going to be a short conversation, and I don't think it's going to happen overnight. But I think it's a conversation that can now start, and there is a model there to start from to say what can we take forward to be able to work with here. And we're already starting to do that. And how do we do that in some of these different areas? So I'm sure there are ways of taking significant time and significant cost out of that regulatory process to get many of these products safely through to market. And that should be something that we're all trying to push forward.
And Justin, I guess, you know, your take on that, you know, I know it's difficult, but would you say are we moving towards more parity with different regulatory agencies? Again, has it taken a pandemic, you know, to kind of say you have got to be on par, guys? You know, if we're trying to actually deal with a real global problem, you know, we can't all be diverging. Processes obviously are always going to be different, but a little bit more aligned. And again, has this taught us that they can be?
So I think probably the answer that I can give is, you know, I think that there still remains challenges to the regulatory pathway for a lot of the space that we're talking about, right? And for me personally, I mean, I worked on the ACAGEN, which no longer exists, but plazomicin IV formulated therapy, and the critical indication was so hard to recruit because of the narrow window that was needed to meet the phase 3 endpoints, and it was I think to Janet's point, I think that if as we think about as a collective in the AMR space around platforms and tried and true technologies that can be used for a number of different diseases and or kinds of, it allows FDA and the regulators to probably have a little bit more comfort around this notion of this has been demonstrated safe, this has been utilized before. It's the same, we're switching targets kind of thing. I think that is probably the better or safer bet for a quicker pathway, if you will, through the regulatory agencies.
Yeah, on the same lines, Deborah. I think, and I think it's a risk benefit that we are all the time facing. So when we have seen things speeding up, is when the risk benefit make a clear case. And in this space, maybe this risk benefit, it is narrowing the patient population that is affected. So I think that will be an interesting one. Can we demonstrate this risk benefit and accelerating or discharging long and very costly phase 3s using different endpoints and incorporating some of these endpoints into phase 2 studies. So I would love to hear Marco's point of view, as he's obviously the right person to comment, and we're working with him in TV to try to do this as well. So if we have a window opportunity that he's connected for more than 20 seconds, I would love to hear him.
He obviously knew that you were going to ask that, David, so he's disconnected.
Rightly so, yeah.
Oh, I love it. So I'm just seeing, so questions and comments are still coming in. So we have one. So Justin mentioned a very key point. There is still a lot of regulatory issues to sort out and clinical trials, to your point as well, David. I believe we have Marco. Marco, can you hear us? He might be able to hear us, but I'm not sure he can actually respond, which is a shame. Okay, so yeah, I think we can all agree that, again, hopefully another legacy is learning that you have to be a little bit more innovative and have the patient in mind in terms of clinical trial design and being realistic about your ultimate endpoint of safely and as quickly as possible getting things to that decision point. This is an interesting one that's just come in as well, not just the regulatory pathway, but I guess for the countries where this applies, the health technology approval process. So I guess that this is an interesting one for this panel, but again, it's back to, I suppose, in the context of what's changed in the last year. I mean, has the value of antibiotics and antimicrobials, I guess you could say that globally, the public, in terms of perception, would say absolutely these are incredibly high value drugs, but could we in any way improve the health technology assessment process for antibiotics? Could that potentially change? Could there be a new way of doing that? And obviously there's a lot of stuff that we're working on in terms of pull incentives to that, and the person that's asked the question absolutely needs to stay tuned for lots of other sessions during the process. But I specifically mean here the impact of COVID. I mentioned in my brief intro a lot of the legislative changes the world over that are in play, being considered at the moment. So I guess just folks high level thoughts on that, just in terms of where we're going, but what's maybe happened over the last year, 18 months, and how it might have affected the people who actually matter on this in terms of regions of the world where there are these processes. because there's always perceived value versus, you know, what the real value is, and how that obviously impacts the whole field. I think from, you know, my take on that, it's definitely something that's in process, and certainly from being something we're trying to do as much as we can to gather the information and, you know, communicate that to be members. So I'm looking at some other questions coming in again on kind of supply reimbursement. So I guess back to preparedness for any pandemic, and not going back to the kind of nomenclature and what do we call, and there were some great points, so thanks Pete and everybody else for the feed in the chat about making sure you use the right text and nomenclature for the right audience when it comes to this. But I guess that aside completely, from, you know, your talk, Justin, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on at BARDA. There's a lot in play on the European side in the kind of HERA landscape. Would the panel say that, you know, we are really ready if and when there's another pandemic? Is there more work to do? Can you ever be? Or are there core lessons absolutely that you can take from our experiences over the last 12 plus months that we really can now put in play for the next time? Or how much work is there yet to do? So probably, I think, over to you first, Justin, on this one.
Yeah, I mean, great. That's this great question. I think the you know, one of the biggest lessons learned from this pandemic is still a gap that needs to be filled that still do not exist today. I mean, I think the idea of responding to a natural, you know, emerging infectious disease within this short window of time where, you know, you have 6 months or less is kind of the United States goal to get vaccines out or get new therapies out. That's our target. And, you know, still there remains tons of logistics issues around the supply chain. I know that, you know, there's probably stories that we've read over the last 18 months, which were around like nationalism of kind of buying up all of the needles and syringes, which is why I'm going to talk about this, which is important, is that the what we're trying to do now in my office, and what I'm trying to do is try to get, you know, things on either microneedle patches, oral, you know, small molecule drugs, or anything away from the intramuscular injection of vaccines because of the supply chain associated with that. I mean, we essentially had to buy the world supply of needles and syringes when COVID hit. I mean, in January of 2020, before the declaration of a public health emergency, we engaged pretty much every single, you know, vaccine manufacturer in the world, and we asked them to step up and make a vaccine for COVID-19. We think that this is real. We think that this is something that's happening now. One of the things that I will say is that lessons learned from previous pandemics is, you know, a lot of times pharma is not very interested in stopping what they're doing to go towards the pandemic unless they see it's real, right? And we saw this, you know, I think maybe David could provide some context there after I'm done, but I think which is true. I mean, if you were a CEO of a Fortune 500, Fortune, you know, 100 company, and you stop, you know, your other kind of programs to do this, it's a problem. And we need. I think one of the biggest lessons learned is that to pay and de-risk the development costs associated with jumping, towards this pandemic and for it to fizzle out. It fizzled out in SARS-CoV-1 in less than a year. It was something that wasn't I think that this is different. This was like a once in a lifetime, hopefully, thing, and it's I think it's for us, better routes of administration for these types of vaccines, more diagnostics availability, because then you can kind of isolate, and then ultimately we got lucky. I always say this, is that we probably got lucky with mRNA. We don't know if mRNA will work for the next pandemic. We don't know, so we'll see. I mean, I think we just need new platform technologies that can be readily plug and play into various things. Over. Yeah,
Justin. So the question, Deborah, your question is, are we ready? I don't think we are ready, but we know what we could have done it differently. I think on that we know. So if I go back and remember the frantic days, the first thing that we were asked was to screen the whole of our libraries, and that took ages to set it up. And it's not because of legally; it was because just how to organize the screening, to do it properly, to have consistent data. And I think on the pandemic preparedness side, and this screening of the existing libraries of existing drugs, we should have a very different approach to it. So we should know well in advance what we have in our armamentarium of palliative care, or what options do we have. We lost a lot of time in there. And the second is how many of the people that we have lost was because their immune system overreacted. And I think this is, if we put this into action, probably we would have bought much more time, and we would have, the outcome maybe would have been that is a lot to extract, and probably we need a coalition of a willing to come to a different outcome. I think this is very much needed, and I hope at the United Nations next meetings, all these things can be properly addressed. Again, it would be very helpful to listen to Marco. I think he's going to have a long queue of questions to replay afterwards.
So one thing that just, Deborah, before you go to Jan, is that I think, David brings up a good point in that, in the United States, even in the United States, I mean, we have these monoclonal antibodies that, Regeneron's developed, Lilly's developed, we've gotten EUAs on, and while it's good and successful, this is kind of a parallel to AMR, because a lot of these are IV kind of places. It's very hard to go get IV infusion at these centers, even when we have these monoclonals available. I mean, I look at some of the other countries that I've been to where there's more robust kind of IV, kind of these IV infusion centers. I think is actually the U.S. should probably look into modeling that, because today, I mean, I think if you were to call your doctor up, 8 months ago, if you were to call your doctor up and say, hey, I just tested positive for COVID, I am, mild to moderate, which is very beneficial for me to get this, where can I go? I think most of the clinics here in the U.S., they would be like, we don't know. Go call the hospital, right? So I think that is also another kind of gap in this response kind of paradigm.
Thanks so much. And your thoughts on this, Janet?
So just a couple of comments. Although we're clearly not completely ready for the next pandemic, and it won't be exactly the same as this one, I think there are various things that have happened that hopefully we can hang on to. One thing is that I've seen a lot of groups come out of their silos. And so the people who are working on population data and AI have linked up with the clinical activities and the environmental activities. I've seen the people who are working on diagnostics link up again more with those working on the clinical. And so it's triggered already comments on how we use point of contact diagnostics to look at sepsis and then maybe tackle antibiotic resistance and make sure that we get the right sort of treatments coming through there. So I think it's opened up a lot of conversations and broken down some of the barriers that were there. And as long as we can keep those conversations flowing, I think we should be in a better space going forward. A, to drive through treatments for current infectious diseases that are not in pandemic mode, but B, to then tackle any future pandemic as it comes through, because we will have more resilient systems. But it's going to need work. It's not going to happen by default.
Brilliant, thanks everybody. And nobody's prepared to take a bet on what the next pathogen might be. We won't even go there. So yeah, I suppose as you said, that there's some core learnings. No two pandemics are going to be the same again, and certainly things we know we shouldn't do or we should do better for next time. There's a couple of great points that have come up in the chat, so thanks to the folks that have put those in. Just again, back to this public awareness of infectious disease and possibly the impact of I guess more exposure to and stewardship of antibiotics. So there was a point about, do you think the public would accept, better regulation and I suppose be more savvy about antibiotics potentially in food now going forward? But that was specifically linked to some of the early COVID-19 in food and transmission story. And then that was followed by another great comment about, do you think this has actually helped that public awareness of antibiotics don't treat viral disease, and could possibly, we now see less demand from patients for antibiotics from their primary care physicians, GPs. So again, could this all, have some positive effect for the greater good, more in terms of obviously public, patient and user perception and awareness, and I guess the demand from patients that to some degree does still drive antibiotic usage. So just thoughts on that, because those were a couple of great comments that came into the chat there.
Maybe if I just start on a couple of comments there. So yes, I think it could. But I think we've now got a lot more interest from the public. We've got people talking about these things, but it's how you get those messages fed into the system in a way that actually changes behavior. And that's going to take quite a lot of work, because while there are some good messages out there, there's also an awful lot of nonsense out there, and not my generation, because I don't deal with social media, but certainly the younger generations tend to, and it's very difficult to control messaging on those areas and get messages out that are really factually correct and that are helpful. And so I'm not quite sure where the balance sits there. And I certainly don't see too much messaging at the moment going in there around antibiotics. A lot of it is around vaccine hesitancy and things like that, which is clearly causing a huge amount of the noise out there at the moment.
Yeah, so I think the simple answer is that I can say is, it starts and ends with better diagnostics, availability that's available either at the GP, for my European friends, or in the family medicine clinics here in the United States. I think just anyone with children, including myself, I have 2 kids, is that the idea of having, when we go to our doctor, our pediatrician here in the United States, the question always arises around, is this bacterial? Is this viral? Is this a croup viral cough, or for my kid, or are we talking about something else? So I think, even here, it's pretty much impossible to get some sort of multi-panel testing done, right? If it's kind of the tried and true method is the wait and see kind of approach to this, which in my opinion isn't good enough for a lot of the like the 80% of the population probably does not like that answer. So then they would go and shop, they could probably go to a different, urgent care, go to a different place and try to get antibiotics, right? Because, oh, it worked for me last time, let's keep using antibiotics, whether it's real or not. I mean, majority of the psychology around this is that, you go to the doctor when you're pretty much at the peak of whatever illness you're facing, right? If it's virus. So, if the GP prescribes, antibiotics, theoretically, you're already coming down off of the virus kind of, you're getting better essentially. So people, may associate that with antibiotic use. I think again, better availability of kind of these tests, I think would help overall address some of these issues.
Just before David jumps in, that's fantastic, Justin, because we did actually have a comment in the chat about that, just basically saying, well, hey, what about point of care testing again? Surely this is something that COVID, really should have brought to the fore again, and the importance of that. So that's great that you've touched on it. Thanks.
Yeah, precisely. Therefore, I was going to just mention that bit. If you ask before how many people have run antigen tests before when they were feeling sick, probably that will be very low scoring. If you ask today, my kid is going now to the UK to study for a year, and the first thing that they have got from the school, it is a monthly testing, so they get their antigen box so they can use it if they are feeling sick. So I think that's going to completely change our perception and the use of the drugs when they're really needed. It would be lovely that we could have a better understanding on that. So I think that's going to significantly change in the future.
That's a fantastic point, isn't it? As you said, just this mindset now of get tested before next step. That if before I'm prescribed anything, I just need to be tested in probably a much less unpleasant way than a COVID test. Yeah, maybe that's another legacy of this, that it's a mindset change that will benefit the AMR field, and clearly, I guess, commercially for the importance of diagnostics, for commercially as well. Yeah, absolutely critical.
Yeah, I would like to make a second point, and probably this is not very scientific, but I think it's worth outlining, and it's that this current feeling that the people go to do virtual visits to doctors, and then this expands as well the early awareness of not using the drug if it's not needed. And I think this is something that the COVID has brought in, so people can get and do a virtual medical appointment, and then the doctor simply taking pictures and information can probably recontact the first attempt to get an antibiotic being taken. So I think that is a lot of work that can be done on this very early assessment of what is needed, what therapy is optimal. So I think that will be, I hope to see an evolution there too.
Yeah, that's another great point, and another thing that should, and looks as if it will, well, certainly in some parts of the UK, stick. Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we're in the home stretch now. Final 5 minutes approaching. So I think my final question to the three panelists, and it's unfortunate that apparently Marco's technical problems seem to be terminal, so he has been unable to join us completely. But I'd just like to ask all three of you, in terms of your own work, the impact that the last year and a bit, and I know Janet touched on it a little bit. So for example, Janet, have you been inundated, hope you have, with more folks wanting to connect with the network and test more new compounds? Justin, hopefully you've been inundated with people wanting funding, and you're seeing more interesting, and I mean that in a scientific, clinical, and hopefully commercially beneficial way as well. And I guess, for David, have you got people trying to connect and collaborate with you and the wider network that you're involved with as well, potentially? Have you seen just more interest, but that's impacted, your own work over the last year and a bit, thanks to COVID?
I have to say that the impact on me for COVID has been very negative, as most of my TV people wanted to shift to COVID. So that wasn't optimal. But in terms of awareness, of willingness to test compounds and to apply new technologies, I think that has been massive. The number of people developing technologies that they believe they can help understand how a lung disease proceeds and how to, on that front, on the technology side, that's been amazing. The number of options that people that have approached us, and I think that's a positive one on the infectious disease, lung infectious diseases particularly.
It's been fairly.
Sorry, Janet. Go ahead, Janet, please.
It's been fairly crazy for us. So yes, it as I think I said in my introduction, things have moved way quicker than we anticipated. But it's been great that we have had so much interest, and we've tried to incorporate that where we can and link up with people where we can. And everybody's worked in that cooperative sort of mindset to try and take things forward. I guess it's reduced my carbon footprint. So rather than flying around the world 20 odd times a year, as I have done for the last 30 odd years, I've spent more time sitting in my chair here and wearing my chair out. But amazing how much you can do from the mezzanine floor of your house, which is where I'm sitting at the moment, to get these things moving. And it's been great how much people have pulled together and really made things happen over what should have been a more difficult time to get a big consortium like this moving. So I can't say enough for all of my collaborators and people who've really helped to make that happen.
Yeah, I think the it's been crazy, almost 2-year period of this response. I think if you talk to people, former BARDA people, they probably say like, oh, thank goodness they weren't a part of this and they were out by then. But I think if you are a scientist, public health person, or just in this space, I think no time than ever. It's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to respond to these types of events, and I think we definitely were energized to have a collective mission around to battle this threat. I would say that in terms of attention in this space, 100%, definitely think there are some kind of overall positives to this very negative thing that happened, which is the attention to infectious disease, both from an investment perspective as well as from a government perspective. On the investment side, I think no one prior to 2020 considered infectious disease, anti-infectives as a area that they want to touch, right, in private dollars. But they see the Modernas and the BioNTechs and all these other things, and now they think, wow, this is a great place to be, and I think we should capture that energy and attention from the private sector towards this public health kind of thought. So great, thank you.
So I'm just.
Oh, sorry, Sandra. Yeah, I couldn't unmute that. I was just going to say thank you so much, Janet, Justin, and David. Fantastic final comments and session, and right on time. Pleasure to hand back to Sandra and move on to the next session. Take it away, Sandra. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for this first session, and also Marco could not join. He's very unfortunate because he had some technical problems, but we said that if you have any questions, then put a message to me, we put them together, we can have a short interview with him and then put all the answers he would have said at the panel maybe then afterwards, so that his voice and perspectives is not lost. So yeah, I will grab some out of that discussion, but if we have further ones, just send them over. So thank you very much.